Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and pleasure of having Joe Stanley, a big-time personal injury lawyer up at Syracuse, New York. He's been practicing law, he tells me, almost 40 years come this March. And I asked Joe on here because he's got some really good ideas about marketing, and I think some really good ideas about client service, excellent ideas about giving back to community. And I think you need to get out your pen and pencil and paper and take some notes, because this man, I've been watching what he's doing, and he is doing the right thing, both marketing, ethically, and for his clients. So, Joe, thank you for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the kind words.
Absolutely. So, like I say, I told you before we started the show, I don't like to read a bunch of bios. I think it's boring. So I just want you to tell me your story. Tell me where you grew up, how you got to be a lawyer, why'd you choose PI lawyer? Just tell me your story.
Well, I guess it's not a boring story to me. It's probably going to be a boring story to most people. But I was born in Syracuse, New York, and actually I have lived there my whole life. I grew up in one of the closest suburbs, and I ended up going to a private Catholic high school, and then I graduated from there and went to the College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse. And I graduated with a BS in biochemistry, and I got a master's in ecology from the State University of New York in Binghamton. And it was always my intention of getting a PhD in an environmentally related field, I guess you would say. But I also had other interests. Immunology was also one of my interests, which is, of course, in this day and age, I still follow it. I still understand some of these concepts that were only in their infancy. But in the late 70s, it was our first great recession, or the last great recession, or whatever you want to call it, or one of many to follow. It came to a point I actually took the LSATs almost at the same time I took I had already taken the graduate school exams, and actually I had gotten offers to go to various grad schools for PhD, and I took the LSATs because the economy was so bad and I wasn't sure where these things were going to go. I took the LSAT with never even doing the review book. I just went in there and had to read the instructions, which I don't think is the way you're supposed to do it. But I went in and took it, and I did very well. So I said, I should investigate this more, because if I did this well without studying for the exam. So as it turned out, I made the decision to apply to law school. I got into law school, and I went to Syracuse Law School, and I graduated first in my class in 1981. So law school, it became something that, as a scientist, I thought law was relatively easy to comprehend and understand. And it came, if you come to it from a logical perspective, which is, when you're doing science and math, I could always understand the logical reasoning. It always seemed easy to me. Even to this day, people are annoyed because it all seems too easy to me, because I guess I was fortunate to find that out. But so I became a lawyer. I thought I was going to be an environmental law lawyer, but I was dissuaded of that immediately, because that's probably the worst practice of law that you could ever imagine. You spend your time dealing with arguing about how many angels can dance over the head of a pin, and with federal regulations. And it wasn't something that I would consider enjoyable. And I ended up in a firm that did personal injuries, Social Security, and workers' compensation. And I had a lot of science and medical background, so it was relatively easy for me relatively, and I say nothing is easy once you start practicing law. And I was with that firm for 8 years. I became a partner and left because of disagreements with the management in 1989 or 1990. And going out on your own is interesting experience. And I can say at the time, it was incredibly difficult. And I can't imagine how someone could go out on their own, particularly in this business. Because I recall one of the disagreements I had back at the time where I was as a partner was advertising was just becoming permissible, or at least was on the threshold. And actually advertising had just at least theoretically become ethical in the late 1989, 1990 in New York. And I saw an incredible opportunity to use that tool in a way to get business. And a lot of the people I worked with didn't agree. They just didn't agree. And, there was one lawyer, and I'll never forget, you talk about being in the forefront. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. He was the first lawyer to start advertising both. I think it was only just radio. I still remember his name. His name was Kaposha. And he generated so much business that he had offices across all of upstate New York. And I know from people who worked there that he was inundated with work, and much more than he could handle. In fact, wasn't set up for it. And I don't know that the technology at the time wasn't set up for it. He wasn't set up for handling employees who ended up deciding that they were going to take half the business. And he was more successful than he ever imagined. And in fact, he succumbed to the success. He was able to generate the work, but he wasn't able to effectuate it, which in my mind is always the critical. You can you can generate business if you're a good marketer, but if you can't perform the services, get the best result for the client, then you're just a peddler of false promises, really. So I learned that lesson, in my mind. I said, well, this obviously, if you're going to set up and market, you still have to be able to do the work, and you have to be able to do it the right way. And it seemed easy. It seems like an easy thought, but it's not.
It's funny, Joe. I had the same thing happen to me, except mine was a little later. Mine was in 95. That's the reason I started my own practice. I was with a firm, a well-established firm. And I said, we got to change with the times. And they said, no, it's unethical. We're not doing it. And I left, and I started, and it is daunting because I had the same thing happen to me that happened to this gentleman you were saying. I went on TV and I went from signing up 20 cases a month to 120 cases a month in like 60 days. And it was just, I had to cut it off because I had to go hire some people, bring them in, get the processes, the procedures. I always tell these lawyers that come to PILMA, say, I just want more cases. I want more cases. And I said, be careful what you wish for. And then once we show them how to get more cases, then they're coming to me, I need help. I don't have the infrastructure. I don't have the systems, the processes, the training. But that's a good problem to have, but it also can breed malpractice claims, bar complaints, and it's just not good client service, right? And I know me and you both, I can tell from talking to you, we're all about client service. So you went out on your own. So tell me, what did you do? I mean, what was your first marketing deal? What did you decide you're going to do?
Well, I went to radio because that was really the only, actually, I didn't have any money. I had one employee and myself. I still remember doing the radio and doing 2 depositions a day to keep the firm going. And gradually I was able to build up, and it was slowly because I had, this is, when you're one person and the marketing is still just becoming something that people were doing and didn't have the funds. And I really, I guess it enabled me to slowly appreciate, figure out the processes, brought people in as partners that didn't know what they were doing and didn't want to do the work that was necessary. So it took time. I can say from 1990 to 2005 was a growing and learning process. Learned a lot of things, set up a lot of infrastructure, became virtual. I mean, in 1990, I set up a case management system that wasn't completely virtual because that's the only way you can do a volume. If we were, even then trying to do everything by paper, you couldn't service the client, and you can only handle so many cases without having an infrastructure of employees and people that you can't afford, particularly in today's PI business. So learned how to do that going forward. And by 2005, it was 2006, we were completely virtual. Everything was completely virtual. We had opened up 2 other offices that we only worked virtually out of. We only traveled to the other offices, even back in those days, even though they were busy offices. Trying to manage people in more than one location. Maybe other people can do it. I have found that there are so many problems inherent in that. It's hard enough to manage people when they're present. And even though the case management system, you could see all the work that people were doing or not doing, if they're not present, it's a problem. And in this pandemic has proved it in my mind, is that remote work might be fine for a few people, but generally in our business, it is not. It is not I don't see it as being something that can be done because it's a teamwork. It's a team effort, and you're learning every day from everyone else, and you're evaluating every file, and you're evaluating every step. And I don't see how that can possibly be done remotely. So, but anyways, going back to 2005, we went all virtual. We were growing slowly. We implemented marketing strategies, and even then, we were competing against what I call the crash and burn lawyers that advertise for strict volume. They had thousands of files with only 3 lawyers. They were the heavy hitters in our market, and Salino and Barnes and some of the other markets, and I'm sure that's a name you might even recognize. So we competed with them, and we continue to compete with them. And we have learned our lesson. And actually moving forward, the lessons learning is that you're only successful as the people that you have as part of your team. Because if anybody tells you they were their own success, they're full of baloney. I've been fortunate to have people working with me that have made me successful. Without the many people, past and present, that have worked diligently and thoroughly, I could not be where I am today. In fact, every day I wake up and still amazed as to how I got from where I was just telling you in 1990.
Tell me about your firm today. How many lawyers? How many staff?
Well, it's interesting. We have 8 personal injury lawyers. We have 1 dedicated Social Security disability lawyer, and we have 4 workers' compensation lawyers. In fact, I I took them over in 2016, the comp firm. It was an operating firm that had been in existence for a very long time. Actually, the father of this firm and my father went to college together, the Fallon firm. So I had known them for a considerable period of time, and I had discussions with them over the years to say, okay, you guys need to get into the 20th century, not even the 21st. But, it's hard to give up your identity when you have a family business for forever. And fortunately, I was able to bring them on board. They work very hard. It's a very difficult business. It's 2 sisters and their brother-in-law, and then they have another associate. That workers' compensation business takes a special breed because it's kind of like matrimonial work or family law work. because it's very personal. I mean, it's even more personal than the PI business. People understand that there's a start and a finish to the PI business. There may be a start to the workers' comp business. There never seems to be a finish, at least the way it goes in New York. So that's our firm. We have two buildings because when we merged, we didn't have enough room in our old house that we remodeled. So they still in their old building below, which is the Erie Canal is below their building. And they tell me that if you go down in the streets below, you can still see some of the gas lights and some of the parts of the canal if you go down to the public utilities below. I have not ever had that adventure, but they say that is true. So one day I would like to do that.
Yeah, well, one thing that a lesson here that our viewers and listeners can take is that there's more than one way to grow, and one way to grow is by acquisition. In fact, PILMA, the Personal Injury Lawyers Marketing Management Association, we do an event every year on marketing management, but this year we're doing a bonus day on nothing but buying and selling law firms. And the reason that I'm doing it, Joe, is because a lot of lawyers are reaching that age where they want to retire, but they don't know how to get out of it. Or they just want to close it down, and they've got value. They need to get value for it. And then there's a lot of younger lawyers that want to grow and are very aggressive, and they're trying to figure out, can I grab some of these law firms, and what does it take to do it? It's like everything else. I'm sure there's landmines in buying businesses, just like there is in selling businesses. The one thing I want to go back to, Joe, you said something that I get a lot of questions about. And that is, people comment and say, well, Morgan and Morgan, they've come into town, or some big, I call them 800-pound gorillas. They just come in and just tear up the airways with TV and billboards and radio. And I know Salino and Barnes. I think Mr. Barnes, one of them died.
Yes, he did. He died in a plane crash. Yes.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, if I remember correctly. But they were big. They were 800-pound gorillas. So what would you tell a lawyer out there that's got this 800-pound gorilla? Because you've been very successful. So what's that secret to dealing with that?
Well, again, you have to be true to yourself, and you have to find out how to market yourself such that you are the true believable person. You have to be someone that they're going to consider in the top three. And you don't have to spend nearly as much money as they do. There's philosophies. If you have unlimited funds, then you are going to get a certain number of files. There's only so much you can do with that. The blunt force approach. But we have always focused on is the education, always educating. I mean, I participate in these radio shows as part of my marketing that are just information shows. And I always have been a believer that informing on both radio and TV, I do informational shows, giving people information that can help them, not necessarily help you, because they're the questions I get asked and answer or try to help. Most of them, 95% of them, don't have anything to do with what I do, but they're important to the general public. They give lawyers a very good impression. And I can tell you that if you have a high favorability rating, people are going to come to you. They're going to write you good reviews if they think you're favorable, and then you do a good job. And those all come around. I mean, people call lawyers because they saw them on TV, but they're going to be more likely to respond even to a less ROI, so to speak, if they consider you favorably. In other words, if you're likable and you're knowledgeable, people respond to that, and you treat them with respect. You try to inform them, not to instruct them, and there's a big difference between those two words.
I've always preached, Joe, for the last 20 years that people hire lawyers they know, like, and trust. And you just said that. I just put it in different wording, but You'd like to meet a radio. Do you do the talk shows, or do you do radio and just little like 3 minutes call-in sessions, or you actually do talk shows?
I used to do talk shows, but I found that the 4 or 5 minute call-ins work better.
Okay.
That I do on probably, I think it's 8 or 9 different stations in all of our markets. People call in, people listen. I go to the grocery store and people come up to me and ask me questions, which I consider it an honor, that out of the blue, somebody is comfortable enough that they will come up and ask me about a problem they have, if I can help them. So I considered I consider it effective because people trust you to give them an honest answer about their problem.
I love it. So yeah, and the deal is you can do all these radio shows sitting in your house. I mean, on your cell phone, right? Or do you have to?
I do some of them in person. So I have a little bit more fun. I go to the radio station. Well, we've been sort of restricted. We were away for a while, then I went back to a couple of them, and now we're back again to remote. Yeah. But you get to know the personalities, the radio personalities, much better when you're in person. So it's more of a friendship kind of situation. So they are also selling you to their listeners when you are participating with them. So I'm a team with them, and I always say to them, listen, I should help your ratings. We're doing this as a marketing thing, but if I'm not helping your ratings and people aren't listening, then I'm really doing a bad job. In fact, I remember trying to sell this concept to the first radio station that when I first tried to do it, when we came up with this idea a long time ago, and they were very, we can't have you be live and do this. No, we don't do this because people won't like it. It interferes with our shows, it does whatever. There's a whole list of things these the radio programmers, we can't do it, it's just not, it won't work, people don't like it. And I remember they put me on it like 5:45 in the morning for the first time, just to gave me they gave me the morning show, but it was the worst actors, and it became so popular that they put me at primetime. They put me at 7:14 within 6 months, because people were looking forward to it. It's something different. It still is something different. It's fun in some respects too.
Yeah. So I was looking at your website, Joe, and I got to tell you, I was very impressed. You have a load of videos on there, very informative. I know you keep talking about this, educating, and I've been a big proponent of my whole life of educational-based marketing, is what I call it. I'm from that old school, the more you tell, the more you sell without selling. But I think the other deal is there's this gentleman named Cialdini that wrote these several books, and it's all about reciprocity. When you give and give and give, some of it will come back. Not all of it. If you give it just to get it back, it won't work. But if you give it with sincerity and genuineness, some of it will flow back to you. I think the, biblical would be, it comes back, sow the seeds and it comes back or whatever. But I think you're a living example of that, because you also have a charity, don't you? Tell us about this charity. You've been doing this for a long time, and I know it's dear to your heart.
Yes, it's called Music for the Mission, and it focuses on helping the homeless and the hungry in the communities that we serve. And I came up with that idea a long time ago now. I think it's 2008. And the idea was, I love music, even though I can't sing or dance or whatever. I love sound, but I'm not that great at producing it. And I think everybody likes music. And so the idea was to use music as a means of providing events for people to come and have a good time and helping out those less fortunate. And I have always made all my marketing deals, all my marketing partners work with the charity in conjunction when we have events, that if I'm going to do business with you, you have to sponsor the events. You have to come forward and tell people about their opportunities to come and have a good time to have the charity. And, the reps from the media companies, most of them love it because it's something that they don't have an opportunity to really do to get out there and help people. And so when we get together, they come up with great ideas to run these events. They run events. We came up with events that generate funds for the charity. I know we figured this, again, like everything else, was a learning experience. I remember the first time we tried to sponsor an event, and we got some three mid-range artists to come. It was more work, most work we ever did. Three of us did. And it was just an unbelievable amount of work to try and schedule an event at one of the big arenas in town, get the artists, do all the, oh my. And the number of things you have to do as an organizer, as a promoter for these events, God bless them, because that was the only time we did that. We have scaled down how we do it, not the size of events, but we try to let other people do the nuts and bolts, because they're way better at it than we were. We didn't know anything. We got the event off, but we learned a lot. And you know what? Knowing what you don't know is a good thing. And that's one of the things I always say. And I should have listened to myself for that one.
So we're getting close to the end, but I want you to tell me about this Maximum Awards. I was looking at your website, and I saw this video under your video, because you got all these informative FAQs, but then you had this thing called Maximum Awards. And I want you to just tell us what it is and why you do it.
Well, it's something we came up with, an idea that one of our partners came up with and said, well, Maximum Awards, here's the last 10 cases that got settled and the client got the most they could possibly get. And so, yeah, Maximum Awards was something we focused, we talked about, and is it true and a real promise? And as I always say, is that getting the maximum for the client was always our goal. And in a lot of situations, the maximum for the client may not end up being the maximum for the lawyer. So that's how that concept came up. It was something we always did. So we were comfortable with making that kind of a statement because we always did. And, it then requires us from day one to explain to the client, and so they understand what that means and what we're always trying to do. Not when the case gets ready to be resolved, that they're coming up with, we're saying, this is the best we can do. And they're saying, well, the max, that's not the maximum. Again, it's something you always have to do, is manage expectations. But also it's a philosophy, is that a lot of cases we litigate that other lawyers might not, because if you don't litigate them, the client doesn't get the best deal. The lawyer might not get the best deal, but the client gets the best deal, because a lot of these insurance companies now just don't pay the fair value of the case without the case going into litigation and almost going to the very end.
Right. It's changed. Because there's a lot, like the big, I call them mills, they don't try the cases, and they know that.
Well,
I'm being honest.
Yep.
Yeah, they might refer to somebody like you to go try it, but they're not going to try it.
Well, and again, if you can settle a case, 3 hours worth of work for $10,000, that's $3,000. But if you have to litigate it and you get $30,000 after 3.5 years, that for the lawyer is not the benefit. For the client, it is.
So what other things have you done? You told me about this Maximum Awards. I know you do a lot of videos, and radio's been really good for you. Anything else that you would give advice to young lawyers about how to market their firms or anything, grow their practices?
Well, I think that you need to find out what you are good at in terms of presenting yourself. For me, I always like to give advice. People tell me I always want to give advice. And so I've always been comfortable with the Joe knows part of the business. So it helps. And I'm sincere because I am. That's who I am, and that's what I'm doing. So I think, everybody is different. You have to be comfortable with yourself about your promises. First of all, they have to be real, and they have to be honest. And you have to be honest with yourself. And again, you have to know what you don't know and know what you're not good at. And then either work on those, which is not that easy, or focus on the things you are good at. And people will understand your sincerity. And again, those are the things we always talk about. But, ask for and listen, by the way. And don't as I said, and that's the most important thing, I am successful and we're all successful because of all the other people we have worked with. And I think you have to treat the people you work with dignity and respect and listen to what they have to say, because they are the people that are going to ultimately decide whether you rise or fall.
I've always said, Joe, leverage your strengths and delegate your weaknesses. And then, because you know what I'm saying, and put your ego at the doorsteps, and don't be scared to hire people smarter than you. And I think you've done that, and that's why you're successful. That was one of my really key things to my success over the years. Was I didn't finish first in my class, by the way. I mean, I was okay. I made law review, but I was smart enough to know that I didn't know it all and I couldn't learn it all. Like, I was never the best trial lawyer. Okay. I was pretty good negotiator. I did a lot of mediations. I knew how to do a deposition, but I was okay, but I wasn't great. And I've hired great lawyers. You know, I know how to manage people, but I hate it.
I agree with that one.
And so I hired really good managers, you know, and I know I'm not a detail person, so I hired a COO, but I know what I'm good at, and I love helping people, and I love marketing. And so that's what I concentrate on. And everybody did good by it. Our clients did good by it, and I did good by it, and all my people did. But yeah, you're right. You know, no way I could ever done it. Just like what I'm doing now with Pilma. I got some really good people. I just wrote an article. If you want to grow your business, grow your people first. Because, you know, as a leader, you got a duty to help get those people what they want. And if you can help them get that and raise them up, then they're going to give you what you want. I promise you. Don't you think I'm right on that?
And you're absolutely right. And particularly in this day and age, it's a even more difficult problem because, you know, finding the right people that will buy into your system and to your philosophies, so that we can be successful together is become more difficult.
So, last bit of advice. What would you say? What would you tell a young lawyer right now? What would you tell him? You say, okay.
Well,
your parting words.
My parting words is it's getting into the PI business now is incredibly difficult and expensive, time consuming. You better be prepared for a 24/7 job, and is something that I'm not sure that I would, knowing what I know now, would go into it at the point that I started back in 1990, because it has become a business of many different issues. And I think one of the things you did talk about is that as a young lawyer who's interested, there's going to be a lot of lawyers who are retiring or trying to get out. I would think that is the best way, if you want to do PI business, is to find somebody and get associated with them or do a buyout over time with a lawyer that has an established business. And then you can take that and grow, and he can be successful in his retirement, knowing that he's helping you be successful going forward.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking time to be on our show today, our podcast. And I hope you have a good celebration in March on the 40th year of your practicing law. You know, I just thought about it. This September, I'll be 40 years practicing law.
Well, see, look at that. We're contemporary.
Well, actually, I don't practice anymore. I sold out 10 years. But as far as being a lawyer, I ain't give up my license yet, but I don't actively practice anymore. I sold out in 2010. And then I built another firm and sold out in 2015. So it's been 6 years.
Yeah, I just completed a medical malpractice case a few weeks ago, and we were successful. So I'm still trying cases, even though I am managing also. I don't do it nearly as much, but as long as it's still fun, I do it.
That's what I say. Right. Thank you very much, Joe. And to our listeners, thank you. And until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken.
No, thank you, Joe.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast. the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.